All right. It is my privilege to introduce Mike Heiser tonight.
Thanks for that. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, I want to say a few things. This is my favorite talk to give because I can slow down. Whenever I do this, I seem to get a good time slot, hour and a half. When I did this in Houston at the HUFON meeting, it's Houston UFO Network, probably about two summers ago now. After I was done with this, we went for 4 hours in question and answer. No, I'm not suggesting anything. But that's okay. I've checked with Guy. I told my wife not to expect me back at any reasonable hour. I'm just telling you, by past experience, this generates a lot of questions. I don't mind answering them. I'll stay as long as you want to stay. This is also something I enjoy doing because I like the give and take with an audience. It is really right up my alley because of my background. I do want to say, though, that this is also the material that gets me in the most trouble because of the, it's fairly confrontational. With Zecharia Sitchin, I don't know Zecharia Sitchin. I've not met him. When I wrote the first draft of The Facade, which is sort of a novelization of my views on a whole range of things related to UFOs and abductions and all that sort of thing. When I first did that draft, I had never heard of him. I had heard of Eric von Daniken, but I had never heard of Zecharia Sitchin. After I did the first draft and started to have some people read it, I began to hear the name, so I looked him up and got a couple books and read his material. And at first I thought, hey, this is really cool. I found somebody, because all I had read was the back cover. Ancient language scholar, Sumerian scholar, dealing with the topics that I was interested in. I thought, this is pretty cool because somebody has gone this route before and I will have some direction because, frankly, there's just nobody who is credentialed in ancient languages who does this sort of thing, who has these interests. And I have to be pretty blunt with you, I was very disappointed. I will say some things tonight, as Guy said, we're all going to go away offended, at least once during the conference. I was really disappointed. I don't think Zecharia Sitchin knows any of the languages. I've said that on Coast to Coast AM, so there's no point in not saying it here. That's the best way I can characterize it. It was a disappointment. When I went on with Art Bell, now 3 years ago, he asked me if I would be willing to debate Zecharia Sitchin. I said, sure, that would be fine. And I have not heard a peep from the Sitchin camp since. Now, I think I know why that is. I think at the end of this, you'll know why it is. I say all that to say this. My gripe with Sitchin is purely academic. I do not think, especially, you have to understand the context from which I'm coming. When you're in graduate school, you do not do things and survive like make arguments without proof, like make things up from ancient texts that just aren't there. You will just be essentially just shot on the spot. Your career is over. Okay, you do not do things like that. And that's what I encountered in Sitchin's works, and plus all sorts of just plain mistakes. Now I want to preface our beginning here by saying, in reference to my title, why you should care about honesty and scholarship. The reason you should care is because maybe there's one of you out in the audience here who has studied an ancient language or two, or maybe has a degree in it, but by and large, someone who picks up Zecharia Sitchin's works or goes to a website or looks at this material on the internet, you have no idea how to interact and how to critique this material because it's not your field. You all have different fields. You all have different interests. I said last week to George Norrie on Coast to Coast, I said, George, If you had this interest, you could do some of this work yourself, but it is not very good for your social life. I'm still astonished that I got married. Okay, I actually said that to him. And I mean, I kind of am. I'm still astonished because it's nerdy, okay, to like to parse verbs, okay? Let's be upfront and honest about it. But there are people who do this. There are people who devote their lives to ancient languages, manuscript studies, cuneiform, whatever. And when you are being fed information related to this material, and the author knows that you cannot check him, that's why you should care. Because you are being sold a bill of goods. We are not on the level here that I disagree with certain translations of tablets. The level we're talking about here is that the material either exists or it doesn't. We're not talking about differences of translation technique. We're talking about fabrication of material. And I've picked 6 items that we're going to go through in relation to Sitchin's work. Again, it's hard for me to stand up here and say it's not personal. It isn't, but I know that if you're a real devotee of Sitchin, you're going to feel that way. I don't know the guy. He seems like a nice guy. I mean, I've never heard anything from him. I mean, I've heard him on Coast to Coast once or twice that would make me think he's evil and bad. I have had hosts tell me, people you would know, names you would know, that he is that. I have no idea. I don't think that. I have no basis for saying that. What I can stand up here and tell you tonight is that his scholarship is really bad. Okay, that I can say. Now, with that as sort of a segue or an intro here, what makes, I should add this. This was illustrative with what happened last week. Did anybody catch the Coast to Coast show last week? Okay, let me tell you how these things run. You talk to the producer, you set a date, and then she asks you, Lisa Lyons, okay, write up 20 questions for George. Okay, it's a normal procedure. So I deliberately said, you know what, I'm not going to mention Zecharia Sitchin in these 20 questions because I know George really likes him, and I like George. I don't want to offend George. If you were listening to the show, we're not 30 seconds into the show, and he's asking about Sitchin. The board op, when they call you about 5 or 6 minutes before the show, make sure you went to the bathroom. And they said, well, now George really wants to talk about angels. He doesn't really want to talk about, Jewish texts. Fine, whatever George wants to do. And I'm telling you, 30 seconds in, there it is. And he kept bringing it up. Okay, so I wanted to tell you, I didn't initiate that. It just happens. And so I'm willing to take the heat for it, and I'm also willing to do it because it needs to be done. Why, you might ask, do you think, Mike, it's important to speak out about what somebody else teaches? Is it any of my business? Isn't it mean? Are you just bored? I do get bored. I could have put here, don't you just want to make money off Zecharia Sitchin? I've been accused of that publicly by William Henry. And what I did for William was I posted my income tax returns on the internet for the last 3 years. Now, I blacked out the names and the social security numbers, and I said, here you go, William. Do you think you or Zecharia Sitchin will do the same? William removed his rant against me off his website. Okay? I am not in this for money. You don't believe me? Ask my wife. Okay? She wishes I was. What if I was a lawyer and your friend, and I knew that the lawyer you had hired to represent you wasn't very competent in an area of the law critical to your interests? Should I say nothing? Should I let you get taken? Is that what you'd want? What if I was a doctor and a friend of yours and I suspected that your doctor was unaware of or hesitant to tell you about an experimental treatment that might save your life? Should I just shut up? Would you want me to say something? What if I was a financial advisor and I knew that an associate in my office who was managing your account was not getting you the return that you could be getting? Would you like me to say something? Okay, I'm none of those things. I'm I'm also not a minister. What if I was a minister, though, and you came to me with a theological question, and I only gave you enough information to